Hallo Leute, today I will talk about Nectar, or should I say German for Nectar, an underrated progressive rock band that deserved way more love and recognition than they currently have. So this video will basically go just like my other video on the Beatles. I will talk about each album and share my thoughts on it. So without further ado, let's just get this party started. Nectar was formed in Hamburg, Germany, in the turn of the late 60s and early 70s. The band was primarily composed of Roy Orbison, Alan Taff Freeman, Derek Moe Moore, and Ro Holden. Nectar's lineup would change many times in the future, as it occurs with the best families. Each one of these members would eventually leave the band, but later on come back. The most important one here, I would say for you to take note, is Roy Orbison, since he remained the frontman for almost all of the albums and was the most consistent member of the band. With the essential information on the band's creation out of the way, I'm gonna talk about their first album, which was titled Journey to the Center of the Eye. Released in 1971, intended to be listened as a single continuous piece. Being a mixture of psychedelic rock, space rock, and progressive rock, my favorite portions of this album are Astronaut's Nightmare, Burn Out My Eyes, and the closing tracks Look Inside Yourself and Death of the Mind. This, just as with many other if not most albums by Nectar, is a concept album, and that's a bonus about it, but I think there's better material that I would recommend you listen instead of this one. I used to like this album a lot more, it was one of my favorite albums out of theirs, but with time passing by and me listening more to their other releases, I realized that this is not their best work. In 1972 they followed with A Tab in the Ocean, and you might recognize this album from somewhere else. When the King of Twilight shows me. That's effing right, Iron Maiden made covers of 2 of the songs present in this album. I honestly think the second release is just such a large step up from the first one. It keeps the same genres essentially, although space rock has been left somewhat behind. The album artwork is also so beautiful and goes along with the music so well, I just love it. The songs are also spectacular, I like all of them. A Tab in the Ocean, at almost 17 minutes of length, is my favorite. Then we have Desolation Valley, Waves, Crying in the Dark, and to end the album, King of Twilight. It ends up that every single song in this is good. Being such a great album, you might think that this is my favorite release of theirs, but it's not. This comes close though. I think of it as being my second favorite Nectar album, so let's talk about my number 1 Nectar album and a release that literally changed my life. Remember the Future, one out of 2 Nectar albums to come out in 1973. I like to think of the year of 1973 as being the best year ever for progressive rock. We had so many great prog albums released this year. The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, and Tales from Topographic Oceans by Yes, to name a few. But the one band that made me listen to progressive rock in the first place and get into the genre was, believe it or not, Nectar. Of course, when I was a kid, my father used to listen to a lot of Pink Floyd, but when I grew up I didn't immediately listen to that band. It took me a while to actually get into prog, and most of it is thankful to Carfagan's Bird of Passage, which is a more symphonic prog album, and Nectar's Remember the Future. When I saw this artwork, along with the fact that this album is a 2-part song, both clocking at around 17 minutes, I was instantly in love. I had to listen to this and I wasn't disappointed after doing so. Remember the Future is still one of my favorite albums of all time, and even taking into consideration other big releases by famous prog bands. And even though there's a lot of people that don't give Nectar the recognition they deserve, which I find quite sad. Yes, Nectar didn't really innovate nor create anything groundbreaking for the time, but still, these albums are so good, I just love them. These 2 albums by themselves should have been regarded with more appraisal from the prog sphere if you ask me, but Nectar didn't only release these majestic albums, there are some more that we will talk about later on. In 1973, Nectar also released Sounds Like This, a mostly improvised and live on studio album, more shifted towards a hard rock sound. This release actually came out before Remember the Future, and some of what they play in here is recycled for that album. I personally enjoyed to listen to this one, to observe how they evolved from these songs and created Remember the Future. So let's just go over the songs I like in this album. Good Day starts the album well and is followed by New Day Dawning, which is sort of a reinterpretation of the Beatles' Norwegian Wood. By the way, I only discovered that around a year later when I got into the Beatles discography and heard that song. Other good and long songs here are 1, 2, 3, 4. Do You Believe in Magic, Cast Your Fate, A Day in the Life of a Preacher, and finally Odyssey. I like this album, but there are some other releases I find better than sound like this. The next album by Nectar was Down to Earth, released on 1974. This album is more pop and excessive, but Nectar hasn't yet delved that deep into the pop sound. As we'll see later on, the artwork is nothing special to talk about, so I'll just go over the songs that I like from this album, and man, they are such amazing songs. Astro Man is the most popular song in here and quite a banger. There's my personally favorite one, That's Life, which I like the part that he says the title of the song. We also have Little Boy, Early Morning Clown, Fidgety Queen, and Show Me the Way. Another concept album, but focusing on a crazy psychedelic circus in space or whatever. I'm pretty sure Roy and gang like to smoke the green or slap the tiger. Why do I know so many slangs about weed? I haven't listened to Snoop Dogg, Bob Marley, or Dr. Dre.'s discographies just yet. I will someday, but let's just move on to Recycled from 1974. There are two Nectar songs I am 100% sure that I have listened to as a child. One of them is Recycled, the first song in this album. I am 100% sure that my youngling self listened to the song at least once, and I'm telling you, this song is far too familiar for me for that to not be true. Anyways, I obviously love the song. Other songs that I also love in here are Automaton Horoscope, Recycling, Flight to Reality, An Endless Imagination, São Paulo Sunrise, Hooray, Brazil mentioned, so I'm proud, Marvelous Moses, and the closing track, It's All Over. This is another superb album, and it is so sad that Nectar is not a more famous band. Their first 6 albums are all amazing, and 3 of them are just standout prog masterpieces, and even with that, somehow they are not one of the most popular bands out there, and they are barely mentioned when the conversation about the best prog bands is at play. Anyway, maybe I'm extremely biased since I hold these albums close and dear to my heart, but let's move on to their next release from 1977, Magic is a Child. This is the first out of 3 Nectar albums not to feature Roy Orbison. Now, I don't know why he left, and also couldn't find much information on that, but in their next release Roy would come back, so whatever happened was only temporary. Even without having Roy in this album, I still love it. This album also has such a great artwork, absolutely memorable. They also delved more into that alternative rock direction in my opinion. My favorite songs from here are Away from Asgard, Magic as a Child, Train from Nowhere, and Spread Your Wings. I highly recommend this album as well. The next album, Man in the Moon, was released on 1980 and is the most pop-oriented album the band has ever released, but even with that, I still like this album a lot. Angel, Telephone, Terrain, and Man in the Moon are my favorite songs from this album. If you want to listen to their most pop album, this is the one, but I would also recommend checking out Down to Earth if you're down to prog bands trying their hand at pop. And I'm saying that while I think about 90125 from Yes. Ugh. After this release though, Nectar will disband and only come back in the 2000s. I couldn't find any information on the internet on why they disbanded or came back together, so if you have any knowledge to share with us, please do. Let's remember the future and go to the next album, which was released on, according to Wikipedia, September 24th, 2001. Incredible, 13 days after 9/11, I wonder if that affected the album in any way. The Prodigal Son is the most, let's say, down-to-earth album Nectar has ever released. It It feels very personal and the songs are mostly about things common to people. The album talks about drinking wine, having a family, pondering the older days and such topics. This is also the most emotional album from Nectar. Honestly, this could have been my favorite album were it not for Nectar making other even better albums. But let's ignore the shitty awful artwork and let's talk about the songs I like. Terminus, Oh My, The Drinking Man's Wine, Shangri-La, The Prodigal Son, Be Tonight and Day Night are all absolutely amazing songs from this amazing album. Evolution from 2004 is the next album, and this is the one album from Nectar that my opinion has changed the most about. At first I thought this album wasn't that great, but the more I listened, the more I liked it. And also there's the message about protecting nature and saving our planet, so that's great, I love nature. The artwork is not that bad either, but what matter are the songs, so the ones I like are Faced by the Storm, Always and Dancing into the Void. So remember when I said that Recycled was a song that I had definitely listened to as a child? Here is the other song I mentioned, Faced by the Storm. I am once more 100% sure that I listened to this song as a child, pretty sure about that and you won't change my mind. Overall, a good album, but not as good as their next album from 2008, which is titled Book of Days. For some damn reason, I love this album so much. The artwork is weird and the songs are good. Another great thing about this album is the fact that its deluxe edition has a solo album by Roy Orbison packed together. It is called The Follies of Rupert Tricot and is mostly an instrumental album. So let's go over the songs I like from this deluxe edition. Over Krakatoa, which is an incredible start for the album. La Morna, a beautiful acoustic song. Then there's The Iceman, Between the Lines, Book of Days and Gabrielle's Bridge, which are my favorite songs, but as a whole I just love listening to this entire release. After Book of Days, Nectar released a full-on covers album, A Spoonful of Time, but not my cup of tea, so let's skip that to their next real album, Time Machine from 2012. For a long time I absolutely hated this damn album, just because of the second song, Set Me Free Amigo. Set me free amigo. About some dumbass crossing the border to Mexico and getting arrested. So we have this incredible album talking about time travel and destiny, but then there's this single shitty song about a guy meeting mendigos in a ditch in Mexico. Absolutely amazing. But when I get to skip that song entirely, I pretty much enjoyed the rest of the album. A Better Way, Time Machine, Mocking the Moon, Juggernaut and Diamond Eyes are great songs and I would recommend you listen to those. Not Set Me Free Amigo for sure. After Time Machine was released, Roy Orbison and many other past members from Nectar unfortunately passed away, leading to Nectar splitting into two bands. Nectar with Derek Moore, one of the original lineup, the only one still alive, and New Nectar with Che Orbison, Roy's son. The New Nectar released Megalomania, which is an album that I would love to listen, but my primarily way to listen to music is through streaming, but apparently this album is only physical. I literally searched the depths of hell on the internet and couldn't find it, so that completely sucks. While Nectar released The Other Side, I like The Other Side a lot actually. Apparently it is mostly unreleased material written by Roy. For example, there is Devil's Door, which is a song that Nectar had played live back in the 70s, but was never released in any of their albums. In the end, I like both this album and its artwork. Other good songs are I'm on Fire, Skywriter, Love Is, The Other Side, and Why Can I Be More Like You? Like the same things, behave like you do. Definitely would recommend this album. As of the writing of this video on August 15th, and well, it's recording August 24th, Nectar is set to release a new album. I mean, since they released The Other Side, it is said that they have the material pretty much ready but haven't released it. So maybe the video ends here or not, it will depend if they just suddenly decide to release a new album. So that's the video. I don't know, subscribe.